What's going on, Soul Nation, and welcome to another No Rest for the Wicked video. There is some exciting news that I get to share with you in this video. We're going to talk about what is coming next, and it is pretty freaking massive, and so much more. Weapons, cities, boats, more weapons and gear, and all of that is going to be in today's video because Thomas has been extremely busy chatting it up over on Twitter and over in the Discord. On Twitter, he writes, "I'm extremely excited about what we're doing next with No Rest for the Wicked. P.S. Yes, you heard that loud and clear. And I'm just wondering, what could this possibly mean?" Now, over on the Discord, he starts it off with one game to rule them all and one game to bind them, an obvious reference to Lord of the Rings, in which that they have compared No Rest for the Wicked to Lord of the Rings as that 1.0. As we move through early access to 1.0, this is their vision for their Fellowship of the Ring, for example. So him bringing that up is pretty cool. But the great news that I get to share with you guys right out the gate, Thomas and I are going to sit down and do an interview, and I cannot wait. I've got so many really good questions for him, and I'm also crowdsourcing questions from you guys. That is one thing that I would say is if you guys want to be a part of this, I know by the time you're listening to this video, you most likely have already recorded the interview with Thomas. So I made sure I posted this in the Discord. I made sure that I posted this on the community tab here on the channel. And that's a good way to remind you guys, top link in the description. Hitting that subscribe button or liking these videos is a great way of letting YouTube know that you like this content. Generally speaking, I see a lot of people usually go and say, "Hey, I haven't seen your videos in a while. You're still posting?" And that's just a function of your algorithm will do what you want it to do. So if you engage with, X, Y, or Z, the YouTubes and the algorithms are going to feed you X, Y, and Z. If you choose to engage with my content, maybe you'll get more of it. I don't know. Hopefully you like it. That's the hope and the goal. Now let's go ahead and get into the reason why you clicked on this video. No, we do not have an updated roadmap, but we're going to be talking heavily about the roadmap that we do have because Thomas is teasing out what's next. But I could tell you the Discord chat wasn't happy with those answers. So Thomas goes on to say about what's next. Well, I've already said it's what people expect. Then he follows it up with, and it's also something that people do not expect. Wait and see. But here's where he truly shines, saying, "I wouldn't want to breach our NDAs." And the breach is actually one of the milestone updates. So based off of that alone, I have to say, sounds like we're going to be getting more of the content that a lot of people are wanting. More areas, more bosses, more zones. As to when we might see this, well, we'll speculate that a little bit later in the video if I remember it. Otherwise, I'm going to stick with I think we might get an update at the end of this month, and then maybe every 2 months or so. That seems about right. But anyway, time will tell. Thomas then goes on to answer the question, on one of your interviews you spoke about, paraphrasing from memory, after patch 2, there were only minor changes. And Thomas says, "What? No, I don't think he's ever said that. In fact, there are some huge changes coming, especially if it comes with the breach and with multiplayer." And that's why it sounds like they have sandwiched the multiplayer update and the breach together, which I think honestly would work out well. What you want to do when you bring in multiplayer is also give a lot of content for people to go do and explore, and that will end up making, I think, it a much more re-invitation back into the game. Anyway, when Thomas was asked if the changes were already made as measured as 100% of the percent size of these coming changes, well, Thomas does confirm this is the biggest content update that they have ever done for this game. And I felt like the Crucible was a decent update in terms of size. I know in replayability it added a lot to me personally, so I've been really enjoying the Crucible. But yeah, that's not to say that I can't wait to see what else is out there in the world. Will we expect something on this coming Thursday? No, not yet. So whether that ends up being no, we're not getting the roadmap this week, or no, we're not getting a hotfix patch this week, I think that actually kind of checks out. Personally speaking, I cannot wait to see the roadmap, but what that does mean is they need to deliver once they tell us what they're going to deliver. So it's just a function of building trust. I have a lot of trust in these devs. I think they're doing an incredible job, but you don't want to start setting yourself up for giving in to that negative crowd that will inevitably, find its way into any kind of game or in any kind of gaming community. All right, there's a lot of different subjects, like I said at the start of the video, talking about weapons, timers, farming, and PvP, all of that good stuff. Let's get into it. I've kind of broken these up into different sections. So as they were chatting, obviously on Discord, some of the questions and answers kind of flow a little bit differently. He returns to some previous topics. So we're going to kind of group all of this as best as I can together. Hopefully this is an enjoyable thing to listen to. I'm going to read out the questions and statements verbatim. That way, for those of you who are just using this in kind of an audio form, get the whole picture, and I'll try to remember to chime in if I'm giving my opinion on something, so that way for the audio only listeners that you're not wondering and confused with how I manage these videos. All right. We're going to talk about timers first and foremost. Snaz Blaster says, the discussion around timers is particularly interesting. How I totally get the goal. I also play like No Man's Sky, and timers are heavily baked into that system as well, but it's never felt bad. So I see the goal. And Thomas says, that's good because it's still top of the list of things that people get annoyed by. But I think people get hung up on having to been screwed by mobile stuff. And some people still assume that we'll have timers because at some point we're going to ask you to buy gems that will allow you to speed up timers or something. But no. And he goes on to confirm later in the, we'll talk about it more in the video, about the monetization strategy. And they're going to sell you a game. You're going to play a game. And then they're going to make an expansion, and then you can choose to buy the expansion. So they're not going to be nickeling and diming us the whole way down, which I think is a real refreshing take in a modern gaming world to see developers push back against that profitable mindset, because you might not like microtransactions. I don't like microtransactions. But we're, I think, the minority when you see how much those things truly bring in. Anyway, Thomas goes on to say that he ultimately wants this game to kind of feel like Animal Crossing, not the whole game, mind you, just a part of the farming and gathering kind of simulation. And when asked by Sheraton, or is it annoying to make them bounce to other games regarding the annoyance of timers, Thomas follows it up and says, I think it's always going to happen to some degree. People will blast through whatever content that we put out, and they play, and then they go play some other games. But then hopefully they come straight back once they have some more amazing content for them to do. And this is me chiming in. Guys, content is king. I do not care about concurrency and player numbers for video games. I don't think that is the metric that really makes the most sense. What I like to see is updates come, players return, they play for a little bit, they dip out. Obviously, you want to have some kind of maintained community, and so you want to offer content for that, but that is your smallest of the small player base. That's your niche within the niche, as opposed to being kind of the be-all, end-all, because the truth is hype is unsustainable. And the unfortunate part is that social media and content creation, especially if you're really hungry for attention, those are attention grabbing headlines, and they're both annoying, they're not representative of really what gaming is. And I think the actual healthiest way you can design your game is make it so that you can take breaks. Players do not feel like they have to play in order to do something, because at some point that's just going to fester resentment. I think it's a kind of a thing that works until it doesn't. For example, just kind of like, hey, if you're going to get addicted to drugs, the first bit of it's pretty easy and cheap to do. I don't recommend doing drugs, kids, but the first bit of it, it's like always, like the first hit's free, and then ultimately you get addicted, and then essentially that becomes a problem. We see that happening in gaming all the time, and I think if you can design your game and also encourage that ebb and flow with regular content updates, and with the ability to step away and step back, it means every time you step back in with new content, it's exciting and it's fun, and it brings back those good feelings and the memories, and you start wondering, why have I ever stepped away? And then you realize at some point, no matter what, as gamers, we're going to optimize the fun out of everything, because that's just what we do. So it's an important thing that, it's kind of good within life. Like, we have seasons in the real world, might as well have that. Not necessarily am I equating it to the monetization battle pass seasons, but I'm talking about just kind of an ebb and flow, a natural course of life. Animal Crossing seasons, y'all. Animal Crossing seasons. All right, regarding weapons in gear, lots of really good questions. Elvira writes, we have some questions or two. We will Will we get more ranged weapons like bows, crossbows, flintlocks maybe? I don't know. I still am hoping for flintlock pistols to be a witch hunter captain, but that is asking too much maybe. And second, will we ever get a long sword or a katana that we can hold with two hands? Thomas goes on to say no guns, but there are going to be more ranged weapons. So he doesn't shoot down the crossbows, and things like that, but that there will be more ranged weapons, just no guns. Now, Elvira says, it's just me being picky though. I really don't like holding a katana with one hand. Thomas says, nah, I get you. You want to go full samurai, all good. And ultimately, he hopes that they'll be able to fulfill all the role-playing fantasies that people might have, sans guns. And he does confirm that more halberds are obviously on the way. Also, that if so far they've only released the first 3 tiers of gear. And for those of you who don't know, you can get up to tier 3 gear, or you can upgrade gear to get up to tier 3 using various different resources, both crafted and found in the game world. So that is going to go up. But when it's talked about, like, is there a maximum tier? What's that up? And he says it's all been planned out, but he's not sharing it with us today. Then he goes on to say, regarding grapplers, I thought this was an interesting discussion. It's hard to support them on all types of enemies, meaning grapplers would be straightforward on humanoids. For those of you who don't know, pull it in. But how would you grapple a bear? Pull it to you. But the chat seems to say, like, well, maybe you could jump to the bear. Easiest fix ever. And Thomas says, I wish our animators would see it that way. And then also finally, will we get tomes, books as an offhand? And Thomas says yes. We're also going to be getting pipes. In fact, that is where he goes in to talk about the mage. When asked, will wands be playable soon? Thomas says, well, define soon. There's still a lot of work to do on the mage front. We're reworking the elemental mages so that they'll all have unique and one-handed mages, as well as wands could feel all very unique to play. Thomas then goes on to say, I also love to support Necromancer style builds at some point. I have that pegged for 1.0, but given our level of design, it's not gonna be easy. And then finally says, will there be anything for mages to at least region focused easier, since they mostly use that kind of cast off? And he says, you're gonna be able to puff on that pipe to gain some focus, but maybe you'll lose some life because of that. In this case, he's talked about that before, and it's going to be really cool to see when that is brought in to the game. I've just been leveling up a mage so far. Really, it's obviously going to be the most challenging currently based off of the current implementation. So by the time this gets ready to roll out, it's going to be fun to kind of play around with it. Regarding speed, Snazzblaster writes, maybe it's a question that is too in the weeds, but I noticed that the overall speed no longer is in the enchantment pool. Is this like a permanent or temporary as some of the animation bugs get sorted out? And Thomas confirms it's been sorted out as of today, so the update will be coming to address that issue. Regarding transmog, it is not currently planned at the moment. Now, I don't know how you guys feel about this. Me personally, I'm not a transmog guy. I'm not a fashion is the true endgame kind of guy in these games, but I know that I'm in the minority. So if that's disappointing to you guys, like, you know what, I'm sorry that's a kind of a bummer. I always like to try to deliver good news, but for me, this is actually kind of a win. I think we've seen so much move into that like fashion focus, and that's heavily driven around microtransactions and more. So it just seems natural that gear is what it is, but that's just my opinion. We'll continue on. Regarding cities and housing, we got essentially, if you guys aren't aware, he's talked about this before, but he goes on to say, when asked, is Sacrament the only city in the world? He says, for now. But you've already heard of people talk about Tur and Haven Point, etc. Now, he goes on to say, just letting us out the western door, I'm begging you. And he says, well, that gate leads to Marin. And what might Marin be? Well, if we go back to the early access trailer, and Cassio kind of points this out, talking about cities, I got to question all that we've saw in the reveal trailer, but didn't see in the game for now. Plague Bear with the Witch, the Chicken Bats, Marn Woods, etc. It's intended to be part of these early access updates, or it is intended to be a part of the Breach update, for example. Not gonna lie, I was a data miner for Ori, and we needed to take a peek at the Wicked Files, but there's stuff that looks really interesting, Weeping Sisters, and promising. Didn't told anyone about my findings, don't worry, but that meeting plot twist with the secret character appearance, my heart stopped for a moment. Thomas goes on to reply, the Breach is a part of the early access updates, and yes, the content you saw in the trailer will all be a part of early access in these updates, of course. And then he goes on to talk talk about what's going on at the top of the town for Sacrament. He says, well, the very top of Sacrament is the Sacrament Fortress, which will be the ultimate housing to get. That is awesome. I cannot wait to see it, and I can't wait to see what everybody thinks about that. I know housing is a big topic, especially within these kind of games where I like housing. I just like to have a good system with it. But yeah, so that's where I fall. I'm pro housing, kind of anti-transmog. I'm a weird duck. But moving on, let's talk about ships. Thomas, are you able, or would you be able to say anything about a ship graveyard? And he says, no, not yet. And then he follows it up, says, well, yes, we will be seeing ships in the future. Finally saying the ships don't have guns though. So we're a very no guns kind of game here. We've been on a vessel in the prologue already, just FYI, and can doubling, no guns. So no guns, guys. When it comes to ships, no guns when it comes to flintlocks as well. Regarding quests, the real question is, where's Bola? And Thomas says she's going to have her own quest, smiley face. And then regarding talent trees, any updates there? Yes, he says later, talent trees is actually major heart surgery. That's one of the questions that I really kind of want to talk to him about, where it comes down to kind of timing and planning. Like, yes, major heart surgery, but what does that translate into? Are we talking 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 18 months, something along those lines? That's usually what I always try to kind of strive for, to kind of get that idea, that aspect. But we'll see if he's able to answer those kind of questions when I interview him later today. Now, regarding healing, he does double confirm, and he's confirmed this before, that yes, there's going to be a healer class style that you could play. When asked, I hope that they work in the sword and shield, like maybe a paladin of some kind. Thomas says, I don't know about sword and shield. We're thinking scepters and offhands for the healing weapons, essentially. So we're going to have to wait and see how that plays out. I honestly do think a paladin style build would be really cool. It ends up being, I think, maybe addressed by runes, or even maybe by the talent tree system that gets introduced. And the time will tell, and I'll be sure to keep you guys up to date on all of that. Regarding power creep, when asked, there's a lot of debate on if a player should be able to get OP, even though gearing is intended for the long term. He says, Thomas says, you'll always be able to be OP in some ways, but we don't want Wicked to turn into Diablo. I'm okay with the Crucible becoming more insane. And then finally, when it comes to that Crucible insanity, yeah, they want to actually implement prayers as a system on the Crucible statues, which I think will then scale up the Crucible to maybe be more harder, or add in different kind of modifiers and effects. One way we'll tell is time. So I can't wait to see what that entails and what we can look forward to there. Regarding crafting, Thomas is asked, will we soon be able to be crafting, use the crafting table in Eleanor's room? Can you tease something about it? And he says, not soon, but the scribe table is coming, and there's an update about that further down the road. Now, Sock Flare Rogue writes, have you guys started putting together an advertisement schedule campaign for multiplayer or the Breach yet? No matter what, those two are the most important outside of 1.0 in terms of grabbing new players and spreading word of mouth. And Thomas says, yep, we hope so too. So it does sound like when it's all said and done, marketing is being worked on. Thomas goes on to say, yeah, I hope that there are a lot of new folks jumping in once they can all play together. Certainly, I get a massive amount of messages saying that, so just let's see if people are true to their words. I found that to be very funny, because a lot of it's easy to talk, right? It's easy to say, oh, I'll play your game when, or I'll do this when, and then the when happens and you're like, I wasn't going to do it in the first place. But yeah, I'm excited to see that, having that realistic expectation. And then when and asked about the custom cursor, he says, yes, it's crazy that we haven't done that yet. Also, same with PlayStation button support. And we've talked about that in previous videos. That should be on its way. Now, any updates regarding farming? I want to be a farmer and 10 pigs and crops. And he says, we should allow you to do all of that. I always wanted Wicked, as long as you make it into Sacrament, you should be able to play Wicked however you'd like. Then he goes on to talk about PvP. Is there going to be a CTF, a Capture the Flag, Rhythm versus Cherub, or a 5v5 coming to multiplayer? And he says no, but PvP will be insanely fun. And they do plan on supporting 1v1 and 2v2s. We do believe the maximum amount of players ends up being 4, which 2v2 then would make the most sense. But ultimately, we'll have to see, and that'll be some interesting feedback we can always provide as soon as that rolls into the game. Then the question is will you be able to dismember your multiplayer friends? And he says, yes, of course you'll be able to murder your buddies. Following it up with regarding if he was able to answer PvP arenas, will there be some kind of traps and things like that? He says yes, there will be traps. Basically think 3D Nidhogg plus Bomberman wrapped around a fighting game. So that's the PvP stuff, guys. Some really interesting stuff here. When asked about runes, are there any modifiers directly for the runes? Changes the elements or upgrades the runes like items with Fillmore? Or will we have rare and unique runes? And says, Thomas replies, not the plan so far. That's not a no, but that's not, like, that's such an answer that I would say that if they do that, it might be past 1.0. That might be something way in the future. So it is not on the plan at the moment. And they are planned out 1.0 and beyond. So that would be something kind of a later addition, which would probably be a little bit more of a heart surgery style approach. But we'll have to wait and see. All right, we got several miscellaneous updates. Let's get into it. Kaha writes, good luck with battling the distrust in the gaming industry. It has fostered in players. I know it's taken me a while to have faith in you guys that you will produce an absolute banger of a game and will listen to players while keeping the vision. Thomas says, we need to bring some positivity back. Players are too negative these days. And I think negativity is the easiest aspect of it all. Like, when it's easy to be negative. In fact, it's actually profitable to be negative. I get accused of toxic positivity because of the reasons. It's like, because people think that, like, I can't think critically, and it's like I do. I put out critical pieces all the time, and people hate them. They just do, and that's just something that is just a fun thing for me. Like when I see that, because I think we've lost the ability to disagree, and I think that I would love for the internet to be able to bring that back. We don't have to go to war because we don't agree on absolutely everything. Nobody agrees on absolutely everything. But when it's all said and done, I like healthy debate. I like healthy discussion. I think that's important. I don't want to silence people just because we don't agree on a topic A or B. Anyway, I digress. Thomas goes on to say, I agree that the industry is also in a weird state, and that is why you should support the studios that don't give you the middle finger. And we've seen a lot of that. And Thomas has talked about it. I've covered it here on the channel. And honestly, right now it feels like we're winning. And so I'm all for it. Vote with your wallets, right? Like, at the end of the day, an economy of ideas is really what we want. Like, let's reward good ideas and good practices, and let's, not give our money to people who hate us, in that regards. All right. Thomas goes on to say, one bad thing you get me wrong when you're insulting, harassing, or death threatening people, etc. He says, literally had someone come in and wish that him to be dead on Twitter because we're not making Ori 3. People can be so nasty sometimes. And also when asked, like, what did he study regarding programming, direction, animation, about start making games? And Thomas confirms he studied traditional scripture. I think that is really something exciting. I would personally love to go and study more theology, but I don't have that kind of time and money. But maybe that's something you see me do when I hit retirement. I don't know. I think it's a fun subject to study, and that's something I'm actually very passionate about. Now, Thomas goes on to say, I've been fascinated with games ever since I got my Commodore 64 at 4 years old. And of course, he's still playing. He always enjoys stuff from other games, especially from FromSoft and what they're doing. And he's also looking forward to the next Switch. And then he confirms he also loved playing Mario Wonder, finished it with his 6-year-old boy, which is awesome to see. I love Super Mario Wonder. I'm a big Mario fan. That was my introduction to video games when I was a kid, and I really enjoyed playing Mario Wonder with my kids. He says he's got a 6-year-old boy. I don't have a 6-year-old boy. I do have 6 kids, for those of you who are keeping score at home. And my boy actually turns 6 years old this year, which is exciting to see. Thomas goes on to say, what I love about games is how they bring all kinds of people together. And this is very true. This is one of the things that I've echoed numerous times, that games are a language in which that we speak. It allows us to come together and compete, to play, to co-op, and it allows us to kind of set aside, all the real world BS that sometimes bottles up in our minds and worlds and feeds, especially now with algorithms kind of, again, you define your own algorithm. You engage with certain things, you have certain things. Like, people will tell me Twitter's toxic. I end up having lots of really great conversations on Twitter because I engage with those kind of things. And that is just how it is. Now, as we wrap up with a business model update, Thomas says he sees Wicked more as a platform, and it's going to be on multiple console generations, thinking that and hoping that they can at least sell 10 million copies. And once they've sold 10 million copies of Wicked, he will show off the plans they had for Ori 3. And so chat said they're going to hold him to it, and he says, please do. And then finally, when it said, I don't hate what it is my intention, I just wanted to make sure I understand with expansions as a DLC, or is it something else? And Thomas says, no, straight up expansions. That's what's going to be a part of Wicked, and we'll probably just sell Wicked with all of the expansions included as well. And I think that makes the most sense. It's going to make it easier for people who get into the game later, after the 1.0, after their Fellowship of the Ring moment, and as you get into the Two Towers and the Return of the King moment, like you could see that they could bundle those different things together. Now, when we talk about a multi-generational game, this does start to say and make it sound like this is going to be at least a 10-year game project, if you're talking multiple generations, or if essentially they're confirming that PS5 and maybe Xbox Series X is going to be coming, which we know it's going to be coming to consoles. But that does mean that since we're not yet seeing the shift over with console generations, maybe he's just referring to this generation and the next generation. But who knows? We could continue to go up from there. The sky is the limit, and technology is always going to be changing. So it's going to be a lot of fun. As we always like to do, I always want to wrap up this video with a message of hope. I know that things can seem crazy and just downright easy to get black-pilled. And I was talking to my brother about this, and he's saying like he's so black-pilled. I was like, man, dude, I'm so white-pilled. It's so funny. And for those of you who don't know, black-pilled is doom and gloom. White-pilled is joyful and hopeful for the future. That's not to say that it's you're wrong to feel bad, and that you're wrong, or there's anything wrong with you in terms of feeling like, oh no, things aren't going the way that I want it to, or that I hope it would. But don't get lost in that loop. I see a lot of people get frustrated that the world doesn't adhere to how they wish it did, and then it drives them to be in a state of depression or in a state of anger. And honestly, sometimes that is just, in my opinion, a waste of processing time. You can only control so much, right? You can really only control yourself, and if you have kids, you'll realize you really can't control them all that much. But you can inject influence into that. And so that's why I think that there has been an interesting shift in society. And so to talk to you guys about this for a second, there is two circles, if you think about them. You have a circle of your influence, and you have your circle of your interests. With algorithms and with social media, we tend to spend more time in the circle of interest, where we have no real power. We're just interested in what's going on. There's nothing wrong with spending time in that bucket. But the circle of influence is actually where you have power. It's actually where you can affect change. It's actually where you can be the thing you wish you could be over in the circle of influence. So just understand the difference between the two and where you're spending your time. And so if you don't know the circle of influence, if you're like, well, that's a new concept to me, I never really thought about that. Think about who in your life. This is friends. This is family. This might be your children if you have, and you're lucky enough to have children. This might just be being a mentor or being a decent person, especially online. Influence in and of itself allows you to do the things, or at least try and do the things to kind of get you moving. And so think about that when it's all said and done. Don't get mad and waste your time in influence, in the not influence, the interest, which is perfectly fine to spend time in, but note that it doesn't really care. You can say what you want. You can voice your opinions, and maybe they're heard, maybe they're not. So a lot of people just throw that time into that bucket, and they forget where they really can make a difference in this world, because you can make a difference because you are something special. I think that's one of the things I always want people to know. You are somebody special. You are, I would say handcrafted for this moment, for this world, for now. And there's plenty of forces and plenty of things about this world that don't want you to do what you were made to do. And that's, I think, one of the sad tragedies. Because if you believe that you can, or if you believe that you can't, you're right. So be like the little engine that could. I've been reading that book a lot to my kids. Think you can, think you can, think you can. And don't give up. Just keep trying. What else you got to lose? Like, there's nothing wrong with failure, guys. No one's calling you to be successful. Just calling you to try and keep trying. And you never know what happens. Some of the biggest successes in all of history are those who failed countless times before they eventually knocked it out of the park. And they would never have knocked it out of the park if they just, packed up and went home. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for your time today. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully I will see you in the next one. Thank you. A special shout out to the members. Thank you to everybody who hit that like button on these videos. It's a great way of making, hopefully, your feed a little bit more positive in the day, but also just helps me out as a family man, because some of this money does make a little bit of a difference. It's not a ton, but I do thank you so much to the members, because you do make a difference and allow me to do things like this, cover these kind of games and make these kind of videos. Anyway, guys, love you very much. Hopefully you have a wonderful day. If you're interested, jump into the Discord. Otherwise, hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video. Should be a banger. I'm really excited. And yeah, until then, guys, take care.